Some have said that the direction of your focus is the direction of your life. For the Christian, our focus is crystal clear. We are to look to Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. In every area of life, we are to lay aside the hindrances of our Christian journey and look to Christ as our example and strength to live the life He has called us to live. So today, let's starve our distraction and feed our focus on the Lord Jesus Christ. Welcome to the Walk Talks podcast and today's Friday Focus episode. For our very last episode of Walk Talks for this year, we're very excited for this Friday Focus episode, which is a unique one, as you saw on the artwork and probably in the title as well. We have two speakers for our Friday Focus episode, and I just wanted to share a little bit about what this episode is going to be. Just a couple weeks ago, we had a pastors and youth workers conference here at Southland Christian Camp, and this was our first conference to ever have of this sort, and it really went super well. And so what we've done for this final Friday Focus episode is taken a Q&A session that two of our three speakers did on the final day of the conference. Pastor Ken Keltner is a pastor up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and then Chuck Gourley is the youth pastor of the campus church in Pensacola, Florida. And my dad, Brother Mike Herbster, sat down with these men in front of our conference and asked them some questions about youth ministry. I think you'll find this to be helpful, whether you are yourself a youth pastor or a youth leader. And for those of you who are teenagers as well, it really gives some great insight into some youth ministry philosophy, whether that's something that you're looking forward to do in the future, being a full-time youth pastor or youth worker, or just participating in the youth ministry. Knowing why you do what you do is so important. And so I hope that you'll take the time to listen to this episode, be encouraged, and be challenged by these thoughts from Chuck Gourley and Pastor Ken Keltner.
What do you do when you have some pushback from parents related to your preaching or teaching?
Well, I don't know that I've had a whole lot of that, but I can tell you what probably would be an issue for parents. I'll give you a negative, and then they both might be negative. One, we had a fella come in and mature master. He was a major in the Air Force in logistics, very organized, very well prepared. But he'd only been in our church for 2 weeks. And in a message he had with the teens, he used an illustration of a teen in our youth group. And he didn't use their name, and the fellow that he was talking about wasn't there, but his brother was there. And his brother was familiar with whatever the scenario was. And his brother looks around at his buddies and goes, "He's talking about my brother." Well, he went home, told his parents that. We never got him back. The father will still come, but the rest of the family never came back. And I said, "Hey, listen, stop by Cinnabon or something, get a small pack of Cinnabons or something, and go over there and just let them know how sorry you are that you did this, and you want to try to repair this broken relationship right off the bat." And he never would do it. And about 5 weeks later, he goes, "Well, yeah, I emailed him." I said, "Forget about it. It's over with. They're never coming back." I said, you said you wanted to listen to advice and guidance and youth ministry." I said, "You really don't want to listen. You want to do your own thing." The only thing that I would think, unless, you might help me out. There could be some scenarios with preaching. But one I would think is if you're speaking to teens and you're just flat boring, parents would come in on that and go, "Listen, man, I'm having to pull teeth to get my kids to come in here because they don't want to be in here because they said you are absolutely boring." And one thing about it, teens will let you know real quick if you're boring. All right? I mean, they'll let you know if they don't like you when you're speaking or whatever. You really... to really minister effectively with teens, you got to be a people connector a little bit. And there's people and there's paper people. And people have to learn to be a paper person too. But it's harder for paper people to really turn the corner and be a people person, right? And I would usually, I sent some teams out at Northland, and they'd go, I said, guys, you have to be able to connect in the pew, and you need to be able to connect from the pulpit. And you can't be boring. And, I don't know, there's different styles, with preaching, but probably if you're a holler and a screamer, that's not, in today's teenage, it's probably not going to connect with them. So those are just a few thoughts.
Chuck, any thoughts on that?
I have a quick, easy one, and that is anytime a parent gives me kickback about anything, so preaching, activity, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go talk to pastor. I'm going to say, hey, this is what this parent said. This is what happened. This is how they are responding. And this is what I'm thinking I'm going to do. I just want to make sure that I'm aligning with what you would desire. And a lot of times he has said, I'm going to take care of it. So honestly, I think that if a parent is in the wrong when they're confronting you, your pastor is probably going to want to be involved. If you're in the wrong, your pastor is going to let you know. And sometimes we're just blinded to our own failure, and then he's going to give counsel and provide help for how you can restore the relationship. So I think bringing your senior pastor in is a really important part of that.
And this is a follow-up, and let Chuck answer this, in regards to the parent relationship and how you're communicating, setting the stage, building the foundation with the parents, which is just absolutely crucial. I think we'd all agree. Somebody asked, I just started at a new church and have not been in the youth ministry before. Practically speaking, how do I start to build relationships with teens and their parents?
There's 100 things in a session that I do on building relationships with parents and between youth pastors and parents. But I think one of the main easiest ways to just jumpstart into that relationship process is parent meetings. Parent meetings are so important. So I do parent meetings before church, and I do them in 15 minutes or less, because nobody likes somebody that talks forever. And I have the 5 P's of a parent meeting, right? So I have prayer. I ask one of the dads to pray, and I give him several things that are going on in the youth group right now that we need to pray about. Then I give some praises. Here's some things that have been going well. We're in the middle of this sermon series, and I've heard this kind of feedback from the teenagers, and we just had an overnight retreat, and lots of teenagers made decisions about. And so I give some praises, like these are good things that are happening in youth group. Then I talk about plans, and I go through the calendar, and I give out a calendar. Communicating upcoming events and your plans for your youth group is super vital, because if the parents aren't on board with what you're planning to do, then the teenagers are not going to be on board. So get your parents on board with upcoming events. So I do plans. I try not to talk about every activity on the calendar, but I do highlight hey, we're doing a scavenger hunt in February, so can you please circle that on your calendar? I need some of you to drive for that scavenger hunt. Hey, we're doing an overnight retreat. It's going to cost more money, so save some money this month, because next month it's going to cost a little bit more to go to. Don't forget about camp. I try to highlight the big ones. I don't talk about every single one, because I want it to be quick. I want it to be 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes max. Then I talk about problems. Hey, we here at Campus Church, we ask that teenagers wear clothing that reaches the knee. And boy, the guys have really been struggling the last couple weeks. And so if you can help your teenagers remember that on the way out the door, that'll save some grief on the way in our door. So parents, don't forget about that. We are asking them to wear attire that meets the knee. And it's not a big ask. I think they can meet that request. And then, hey, one last thing. Let me give you a practical tip before you go. So, hey, it's January. We don't have as much on the calendar this month. So, great opportunity for you to take a Saturday and say, hey, teenager, let's go do and pick something your teenager loves. Not something you enjoy. You got to do some self-evaluation on that. Maybe ask your teenager. But go do something with your teenager one-on-one that he enjoys, and purposefully have some serious conversations about their spiritual well-being while you're doing that activity. So it'd be a great idea this month. I encourage you to do that. That's exactly what I do.
How often do you do those?
I do those once a quarter. So I give out a quarterly, trimester. Is that a thing? Once every 4 months, I give out a calendar with the next 4 months on it, and I talk through it. And so I do that once every 4 months. And then 2, sometimes 3 times a year, I do what we call parent seminars. We call them Surviving Our Society. And I do very practical, very intense topics. So like yesterday I did the tech savvy parenting. session with you guys. I did that with our parents a couple of years ago. This past 2 weeks ago, I did a session called The Anxious Generation. I did a book study review on the anxious generation and then talked through why teenagers are struggling so much with anxiety and depression, why it's so common in Gen Z. And then I've done sessions like secondhand smoke. And you're like, what? People don't smoke anymore. Secondhand smoke's not a thing. And then my tagline for that one was how your teenager is affected by worldly content. So, most parents in more conservative churches are like, oh, our kids, they don't have a phone. They're not getting on the internet. We limit their access, but they're getting all of it secondhand. And they're getting it at way higher rates than anybody realizes. And even if you put your kid in a bubble, at some point they're going to go out into all of that. So we need to prepare our kids we cover those types of things. One of the questions in here was, how do you bridge the gap between a parent and a teenager? And we did a session on that. We did, bridging the generational gap. How can you, as a parent, have a solid, strong, biblical relationship with your teenager? And we walked right through Deuteronomy 6. And then I had like 8 practical steps to build a relationship with a teenager if you're a parent. We've talked about going from authority to influence. When your teenager is young, like 7th grade, there's a whole lot of no, you can't, yes, you can. Here's your instructions. But by the time they get to that junior, senior year, there should be more of the, hey, Dad, what do you think? You think I should? He should be asking for your advice, not your permission. So how do you make that transition? So we walk through that in our parent seminars. Super practical stuff. And then parents are like, wow, that was so helpful. Well, then they're going to come back to the next one. And then they're going to email you, hey, you said this last night. I was wondering about, and then I say, well, let's get lunch. And let's further that conversation. And then that gives me an opportunity to build that relationship with, that's actually another, I don't want this to be like a super long answer, but one last thought with building relationships with parents, take them to lunch. Everybody likes to eat food, and it just breaks down barriers when you're eating food. Like, we're all enjoying eating food this morning, and we all feel very comfortable in this setting because we're having breakfast together. Go grab a meal with a parent. You're not hosting them into your home. You're not going into their home. There's not this awkward like, oh, are people judging me for how my couch looks? Or like, I'm not saying you can't visit people in their home. I'm just saying that when you go meet somebody for lunch, it really takes away some of those pressures that may exist in other settings. And it is such an easy conversation. When they trust you, then they're willing to listen to you. And you can't build trust if you don't spend time, right? You spell love, Time. And that's how you build trust. So
that's really helpful, all of that. And Ken, you want to say something on that? Yeah. Parent-teen relationships and how to develop it, strengthen it.
Well, with you as the youth pastor, yes. All right. I had a guy come, and we had like 2 or 3 mission trips getting ready to go on. I was just swamped. Guy called and he goes, "Hey, listen, man, I'm just starting out in youth ministry. I don't know what to do, how to get with these kids and their parents." And I said, well. This was back in the day. I said, what we did is and especially with a family, I know that was a question in there. We used our house, so I wasn't having to go out and meet somebody or go visit somebody. We would have them come in our home. Our kids are there, they're kind of a part of it, but anyway, they knew Dad was home. And so I said to this guy, well, I would try to just start picking out some families with kids and inviting them to come to the house. And so the guy says to me, well, we can't do that. We just got an apartment, and we don't really have much furniture. And I go, okay. So he wanted to be with me like for 4 or 5 days. Second day, same thing. We're driving down the road. Hey, man, what should I do right off the bat? I go, well, what I would do is I would invite, pick some families, have them come over to your house. He goes, well, we don't even have a dining table or anything. I go, I think the church would allow you to just get a folding table and take it over to the house. I mean, they're not looking necessarily, to go into a Better Homes and Garden type home. I mean, they're just, yeah. And I mean, 3rd day, 4th day, same. I said, listen, man. I said, I've answered this every day the same way, and you just don't want to do it. So I said, we want people to come into our home. I told that story about the fella over in Sri Lanka. I didn't finish it with Brian and Victoria Rice. He was a school teacher, woodworker, and all. Well, I was at a youth conference and was challenged with this. And Kathy and I, we we did it. Every Sunday night, we would invite people to come to our home. And Kathy would say to me, hey, how many are coming? I go, I don't know. I just don't know. And it always seemed to work out. We had pizza. But Brian and Victoria always wanted to be. I mean, Brian would come up and go, hey, can we come to your house tonight? I go, absolutely. He goes, can you mention it to Victoria? She thinks I'm just pushing us on you guys. I go, Victoria, won't you guys come in? She goes, I mean, we've been over there for the last 2 months. I mean, you sure you want us and our kids? I go, yeah, come on over. The only time it really backfired on me, I came around the corner and we had like 35 cars outside our home. And I thought, I go in the garage, I open the door, and that particular meal, Kathy was making sloppy joes. We weren't having pizza. And I open the door, I go, hey, she goes, go get more buns. We need more buns. So I go running off. And you want to finish that story? How God protected the simple pastor?
Yeah. The Lord multiplied the sloppy joes.
Mrs. Keltner said the Lord multiplied the sloppy joes.
Yeah,
that's great.
But that is, I mean, man, when they've been over to your home, they feel comfortable talking to you, and that you're even willing to invite them over to your home. I mean, we had 4 boys, and I mean, sometimes it was embarrassing. I mean. I remember one time they came running in. They were doing some sort of Indian cowboy thing, and the shirts were off the boys, and they put something on their face. And then the next time they run through the house, their pants are off, and they're running through with their underwear. And I looked at the folks. I go, "It'll stop there. Trust me. All right."
I want to follow up with a kind of a real life scenario that actually I can't remember who in here talked to me about this, but parents that are pushing their kids into priorities that actually take away from your youth functions, from your church, and the kids are feeling the pressure. Of course, they're involved in like the sports. Normally, it's sports or something like that. And have you had scenarios like that, and what do you do, and how do you deal with it with the parents? And how crucial is it that you have already established some of what you're talking about relationship-wise so that you can deal with those things instead of just letting them go and being frustrated?
I think Boy Scouts has been the biggest one for us. Because a lot of times the sports, if your kids are going to a Christian school or whatever, they're not going to have on Wednesday night. But certainly there are lots of sports conflicts, but I think it's the Boy Scouts that gets me. I'm thinking, why did you put your kid in Boy Scouts if they're going to meet on Wednesday nights? So, of course, that's what I'm thinking, and Mom and Dad are thinking we want our kid to be prepared, well-rounded individual for when they leave the home. So they have a good intention, but they've been distracted by something that is not as valuable as being at the place of worship with the people of God. So I think if you try to go have that conversation, the first conversation you're having with that parent, it's going to go over really bad. I mean, it's going to be a big fail. So if you already have a relationship with Mom and Dad, then you can go and have an honest conversation with them and, talk about the value of church and forsaking not the assembling of ourselves together, and then talk about the value of youth group and what you're trying to accomplish in youth group to better prepare their teenager for when they leave the home. And I think that comes across really well if you have a relationship with Mom and Dad. But if you don't, now you're going to have to build a little bit of a relationship, build a little bit of rapport so that you can go have that conversation. If you try to have the conversation right off the bat, I've never found it to work.
Yeah. One thing I would say is we live in a day today where the teens really run the home, right?
That's true.
And, they say whether they want to go to a youth activity or not. And the parents just kind of, all right, yeah, if you don't want to go. The one, and again, I go back to the days of Bobby Knight when I was, working primarily with teens, even though I've been doing a little bit now. We had a mud bowl, and I mean, man, this thing was huge, and we were going up against another church, and the contest, and I mean, we were announcing it, and this is going to be a blast. We're going to have a barbecue out there. We got a place you can clean up afterwards. It's going to be great. But the losing youth pastors in this competition is going to get a pie in his face. And I go, hey, I really don't want to get a pie in my face. You guys come, and I mean, that church brought like 65 kids on a bus, and I had like 10 kids show up. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And our kids that were there were good, but So that Sunday, I go, hey man, I was hurting, man, getting that pie in my face and everything. But hey, for you guys, I guess I'll do it. But I'm just curious. I mean, so I was talking to some of the parents, and they go, well, yeah, I brought my son over there, but he wanted to. He was laying down in the back seat, and he'd say, Mom, tell me who all's there. And she was, and he goes, okay, I don't want to stay. And they drive off, and I'm shocked, really, probably how many times that happens. And the other thing today I know, and it's probably different for you, but for us right now, we have the most unathletic youth group you could have. And we keep, and we keep. So the only thing we've done well that really got everybody out was kickball against the college class, right? And the youth actually won it, which was miraculous. But we've done some things. But our youth sponsors will get in and help play with the teens. But I mean, really today, I'm just shocked how many do not want to even participate. I mean, you guys have it. You got to see it here at camp. In fact, last year when we brought some kids, I had kids that in the big ball. I go, what are you doing? I really don't want to play. I go, I don't give a rip. Get in there.
That's right. It's helpful. I think you almost have to train the parents. You're almost a parent pastor. And I would suggest also for all of us that doesn't start when they become teenagers, and working in the church to help develop the priorities that the home should have, so that when they become teenagers, you're expecting them to make church and the church activities and the soul winning and the different things that you set up, because you've built a pattern of that throughout the history with those parents. I mean, the parents are crucial to the teen ministry, for sure.
One thing in our mission trips, I don't even know if I mentioned this on the missions meeting with teens, we don't allow cell phones. And I'm telling you, I had 3 meetings with parents, mainly not the men, the women were just like fangs out after me, going, how come my kid can't have his phone? I go, because we're focused on ministry. All the sponsors have phones. If Johnny needs to call home, he can call home. That's not going to be a problem. But I said, I don't want the kids on. I mean, I had to work with our intern because we would be over at someone's home, or we would be out for lunch with somebody, and I'd look over there and they're talking, and he's like this. And I said, hey, listen, when we're with people, don't be on that cell phone. I mean, second time. I go, what aren't you picking up what I'm telling you? Finally, he comes back to me and goes, man, you're right about that cell phone thing. I go, what are you talking about? He goes, well, I was with a couple of people, and I was on my cell phone checking something out, and they actually, people in the church rebuked me for it. I go, good deal. I mean, they ought to be. How many times have I been trying to tell you that sends a bad message? And so I said no cell phones. And I mean, even this year, so we've done it 2 years in a row, and it is still an issue for the parents. The kids have kind of gotten where they know what's expected, but man, the parents, and especially the mothers, are just like, eh. I'm like, whew. And the dads were like, hey, hold the line, man, don't bend. I go, it'd help me if you tell your wife that, all right?
So this is crucial, the communication with the parents, setting some plans, communication to be kind is to be clear. So having fellowship with the parents. The youth pastor shouldn't be afraid of the parents. You should be building those relationships. So I'm sure we could spend a lot more time on that, but let's move to another subject here, youth group growth. Here's a question back to you, Chuck. What is a good way to encourage your teens to be involved in inviting their friends or other teens to come outside of just your church soul winning?
Okay, so there's a lot of thoughts that go through my head on this, but the first one is kind of my pet peeve. I think I've talked to a number of you about this already, but youth group activities should not be lame. They should be awesome. Okay. Stop. If it's lame.
Point number one, don't have lame youth activities.
Absolutely. So if it's lame, throw it out. Don't ever do it again. And then, just continue to work to be better at creating awesome activities. There are some on your calendar that just by nature are going to be bigger. You talked about the Mud Bowl. Our biggest activity, and it is the most work by far, but it is the most profitable, is Color Wars, where we just, literally we tell the kids, hey, you're going to get covered in paint. It's going to be awesome. Paint is going to be everywhere. At the end of the night, you're going to take your shirt home, and it's going to have stains forever that are going to remember this night. And they love it. And it's awesome. Okay, so take advantage of those activities that I'm getting huge buy-in on this. Create invite cards. Don't do the 8.5 by 11. No teenager is going to take 8.5 by 11s and pass them out. I wouldn't even do a half sheet of paper because those are like 1990s. All right. So grab a business size card that is real attractive that says Color Wars with a QR code to your website. Ooh, now we're getting into the digital world, and then on your website have the information. Time, place, location, map, all that stuff. Give those out to your teenagers and say, hey, bring your friends. I know you have friends. If you don't have friends, go make some friends. Bring your friends. This is a perfect opportunity for you to connect them to our church. And then at the halfway point, I get up and I preach the gospel. But you know how I do it? I get up and I say, hey, we got a bunch of visitors today. Listen, we're excited to have you. So I want to tell you a little bit about who we are. So here we are at Campus Church. We're the teens department. And every week we meet on Wednesday nights at 6:45. And I just go into this spiel about who we are. And then I walk through exactly what we believe. I say, what we believe here at Campus Church. And then I just go right through the gospel. And then I try to connect the ones that are unsaved to one of our sponsors at the end.
Setting particular activities as your evangelistic tool, your outreach, your youth. I know some of you guys in here have area-wide youth rallies, and though you don't have 150 in your youth group like Campus Church, the PR part of that, the marketing. Get those kids to take things to their public schools, into their communities, have a QR code that connects them, and marketing is super important. Making the activity awesome, and then being bold about what you're sharing as far as the gospel.
I would even say, I said Facebook, I meant to say Instagram. The teenagers are on Instagram. And Instagram ads are cheap, and you can target it to specific age brackets. So, if you don't know anything about it, there's YouTube pages out there, but you can get the information to your community, and then people show up, and boom, now you have an opportunity to present the gospel.
Ideas there, Ken?
Yeah, if you have a small, if you're just starting out and you have a very small youth group, maybe 5, 6 kids or whatever, again, make the activity so awesome. I mean, that man, they're like, man, I want to do this again. I want to bring it back. I had a guy tell me again, where the youth pastor's coming. He was talking. He goes, man, I don't know why I can't get the kids to come to some of the activity. I go, well, tell me some of the things you're doing. He goes, well, we tour. We had this big thing set up to tour an Arby's, in our town. I go, excuse me, you're going to tour Arby's? You talking about the food Arby's? He goes, yeah. I go, that's not going to cut it, man. I mean, unless they're getting a free sandwich at the end or something. I said, it's just not...
Free curly fries.
Yeah.
Put that in the lame activity category.
Exactly. So they have to, I mean, you got to have fun with kids. Yeah. I mean, you just got to have fun. And if they have fun, they're going to tell their friends about it.
Yeah, and that would probably be a very long, it'd probably be fun to have an idea share of how to make awesome activities and not lame activities. Well, do you have any suggestions there?
You can brainstorm with your youth staff, and
I think the one is talk to the older teenagers in your youth group that they're gonna want to share their opinions. So find out talk to the teens. 2, I think teenagers love free time. They go to camp and they're like, when's free time? That's the first question they ask the counselors. So in your activities, you need to build in some free time so they can interact with each other, so they can have fun. Our first 30 minutes are like 9 square, basketball. It's like, you guys just have some fun. Okay, hey, now we're going to get started with. And so if you build in time for them to just do whatever they want, oh man, they love that. I would say you're better off saying, hey, Saturday night, we're having a hangout at the church night. We're going to provide this meal, make it a good meal. And so just come on out and hang out, and whatever you want to do, it's on you. I've had more success with those activities than trying to do some, creative activity that I came up with that was super lame. So
Now, obviously, you want them not to just come to activities, and you want the teens in your youth group to be inviting them to church, inviting them to your youth functions at the church, and interacting with them when they do come. Any tips on having the teens stay excited about inviting and encouraging other teens that they know to come to church?
And a lot of times you got to read your youth group. And one year, we had just several soccer players. I mean, they just love soccer. Even some of the young ladies love soccer. So we did what we called a short field soccer. And one thing, too, if you're doing something like that, make sure the field or whatever they're on is just, they want to be on it, And it was 4-on-4. And we said, we're going to do it on Wednesday night. Here's the deal. We got youth group going on, but this is going to be an outreach. And the only way you can not be in youth group is if you have guys coming that are going to be on your soccer team, and it's 4-on-4. We had somebody out there reffing it. We had youth sponsors out there. And at the halfway point, we had Gatorade and some, something for them, Snickers, but so many are peanut, have peanut allergies. You got to go Milky Way or something. But we had something for them, and then we gave a challenge, and we saw 7 kids saved that summer. And then they had one of the challenges. I wasn't out there giving all the challenges, but one of the challenges was get rid of some of the junk that you got in your home that's killing you. And we actually had to call the fire department to come out because they wanted to do a burning, of all their junk. And they put it in a barrel, but we had to have the fire department out there. And one of the kids actually went to the first time we met him. He had hair down to his waist, and he was playing soccer barefoot. And he actually got saved, discipled, went on a missions trip with us. And it was interesting. He would keep cutting his hair a little bit shorter, but it was still, probably over the years when we went on the missions trip, and the missionary came to him and he goes, that kid right there, man, I mean, what's up with him? I mean, how he's wearing his hair right now. I go, listen, that kid had hair down to his waist when we met him, all right? He's a new believer. He's actually going to Bible college this next year. We just want to encourage him. And that particular time, we met a guy, we called him, we nicknamed him LT, a guy over in the West End. He looked like Lawrence Taylor, if any of you remember. I mean, just massive built. And this kid, Noah, is with me, and we're sharing the gospel. And this guy is so under conviction. I mean, the pavement had to be scorching hot. And he was coming out of his sandals. He was under so much conviction. But he kept asking. He was wanting to enter the Rastafarian group, with the hair, the dreads. And he goes, does this mean I got to cut my hair if I come to Christ? I go, I'm not talking about cutting hair. I'm talking about you. But he kept saying, so he said, no, I don't want it, man. I don't want it. So we're walking away. Noah looks at me and goes, is hair that important to him? I go, Noah, for some people it's that important. And the next time we came to church after we got home, his hair was all cut, and I go, hey, what's the deal? He goes, man, I'm not going to let my hair get in the way of my relationship, my fellowship with God. I go, amen. So that soccer thing, but you got to read
Creativity.
Yeah, right now that would flop where we are. I mean,
building out creative ideas that your teens that are regulars are excited about coming to your church functions, your youth events, your activities, so that then they talk about it to their friends. There's a secondary question under this idea of youth group growth. What do you do that helps? What can you do to help grow unification of your group, even outside of just your church attendance and youth functions?
Well, can I just add one last thought for the last one? Okay, I think as far as teenagers reaching teenagers with the gospel, because they're the greatest people to reach teenagers with the gospel, utilize your mission trip training to teach teenagers how to win people to Christ. So if you're going on the mission trip, we're going to have 10-hour sessions, 1-hour sessions through the year in preparation for the mission trip. But really, all I'm trying to do is disciple them into becoming soul winners right now. And we talk a lot about, if you're not reaching people in Pensacola, why on earth would we go to Mexico City and try to reach people there? So I think that's one of the ways that you engage. And, then I would say that segues into this question, because I think that mission trip training, that extra session, that extra discipleship opportunity is going to build unity inside the mission team. And your goal is that they are building unity into your youth group. So you're using that as kind of leadership development. And so I think that's a huge thing. That's another reason why I think, I'm sure you talked about this yesterday, but that's why mission trips are so important. I think a casual way to build unification is, actually, you already said this, but if you're in ministry, you should be given to hospitality, right? It's part of the qualifications. I open my home to teenagers. They come over to play video games, and that builds unity between me and them, and that builds fellowship. And I throw stuff on the grill, and they come over and eat food because everybody likes to eat food. And there's something about a messy house, not like a perfectly clean house, that they're like, oh man, they're comfortable with us coming over at any point, and then they're willing to come over more. And especially when the youth group is smaller, or you have a smaller portion of your youth group that comes over, it builds that camaraderie, and then that helps you continue the momentum. I think the youth group is a lot of momentum. So then that continues the momentum when you go on a retreat, when you do a week of camp. All of those things help build that camaraderie. But I think it's the one-on-one, the one-on-five, the like, hey, I'm taking these 4 guys to go fishing this weekend or whatever. I think all of those little moments that you have are building the camaraderie between you and the teenagers. And then it gives you kind of that license to say, hey, why don't you guys bring Caleb along? Because Caleb is struggling right now. He doesn't really have any friends. So why don't you guys bring him next time? We don't want to bring Caleb. Well, are you a Christian? Don't you love people? Oh, okay, Pastor Gourley. And then they bring Caleb, and they bring him, which is so much more important than you saying, hey, Caleb, I want you to come with us. You want teenagers to reach teenagers. Right. So, there's always that one kid that's, he's not plugged in. Well, then give that as a mission field to one of your leaders. And then when they're kind of hesitant, question their true heartbeat and leadership. Again, that confrontation thing that we've been talking about a little bit.
Right. There was one question on there that talks about the whole youth activity thing, and it was something along the line of, did you ever have a bad youth activity, and how did you handle it? Is that on there?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Man, do I have a great one on this one. I was new. I was back in Colorado, and so I had a buddy who had a fairly large youth group. He goes, man, we got this massive blowout activity coming up on Saturday night. Man, you guys want to come over with us? We'll take care of everything. And I trusted him. And I pump it up, man. I bet we had 60 or 65 kids go over to this activity. And it was worse than lame. The kids hadn't eaten, and of all things, they were just having peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, which, I'm fine with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, but then they ran out of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And so, and the youth pastor who was running it had 2 or 3 kids that had attitudes, and they're out there causing issues, so he's having to deal with all that. And I was like, oh! And so the next morning I got up, and again, I had to explain this to him, but there was a great basketball player who played for the Celtics by the name of John Havlicek. And John Havlicek he's in the Hall of Fame today, but he was playing for Ohio State. And he was an All-American. And in the last, one of the last games, Red Auerbach, who was the big guy in Boston that would actually, bring guys in, he was, doing the talent evaluation. He went to watch John Havlicek play. And John Havlicek had the worst game of his life, basically about like how I was last night, right? And horrible. And he went to Mr. Auerbach, and he said, Mr. Auerbach, I'm going to tell you this. That was a horrible game you saw me play last night. If you will draft me, I will never have another horrible game in my life. And I don't think John Havlicek ever had another horrible game in his life. And he's in the Hall of Fame today. I said, guys, I feel like John Havlicek right now, and I'm begging you, please, we'll never have another bad activity again. I promise.
So what you're saying is admitting even your failure there helped unify your.
I didn't put it on my buddy. You know, I didn't go, man. You know, I said, listen, that was on me. So from that time on, I might invite somebody to come, but unless I got really great confidence in who's going to run that activity at that other place, I'm very cautious now.
Let's talk about another place of unification, which is the down and outer kids, the bus kids, the kids that are odd, the kids that maybe stand out in the crowd because they're socially awkward. How do you keep those, and many times they're from maybe broken homes where maybe the parents aren't even coming to the church. So there's a couple questions on that. How do you keep them connected? How do you connect with them? I know that was a whole lot because each one of them is probably a different scenario, but just speak to, and then helping the other teens connect with those teens and get them unified into the group.
We had, we've had bus ministries in some churches I've been at, and I've been out on them, and projects, and we've seen kids there in the projects that have been on mission trips, that have gotten active in the youth group. They came to, but
what's the key to that?
Investing in them, them coming over to our house, going in, meeting their parents, talking to them, we did a little Saturday morning thing. I was challenged to do a wisdom search. So I go, okay. I go, hey, you guys interested in a wisdom search? I'll have some donuts and we can meet on Saturday morning. Well, those bus kids wanted, some of those kids in the projects wanted to come. So I would load everybody in the van. I go, we're doing the wisdom search in the van. So you can ask any question you want to ask, and we're going to read every 25th Psalm, and we're going to read a proverb of the day. And I guarantee you, we'll have an answer to your question. And it was...
Take that idea. That's a really good idea. The wisdom search, where you're connecting with them. You're basically letting them ask you any question that they want. And you're helping them see the biblical discernment, how to make a decision on that. That's a good idea.
And these kids that were, in the projects, I mean, you wouldn't believe some of their questions, and, but, they love playing basketball. I would go, how it really kind of started, I just went to the projects to see them on a day when they were out of school. And here's the thing, too, about bus ministry. I don't know, you don't really necessarily see it that much today, but back in the day, I'd say, hey, listen, we pat ourselves on the back that we pick them up on Sunday morning, and then that's it for the week. I say, no, let's pick them up Sunday night. Let's pick them up Wednesday night so they can be part of this thing. And so the youth workers would help me on that. And one boy would keep raising his hand, man, I need to talk to someone. But we had basketball right afterwards, so I couldn't even get to them. They were out there playing basketball. So the next day, I knew they were out of school. I went to the projects. They're out there playing. This kid actually goes, hey, somebody take my place. My pastor's over here. I'm going to go talk to him. And that day he got saved. And man, he starts being a big-time evangelist in the whole project area. Now I gotta, I don't know if you want to follow up on this, but I just gotta say, it's not easy because we started reaching a lot of these kids from the projects. Well, man, we had a catastrophe one Sunday morning in the auditorium, right? These two guys, and they had just started coming, but I had heard enough about them. And they're sitting in, we always, at that point, with a lot of those kids whose parents were coming, we had a place up front where they would sit, and we had youth sponsors sitting with them. But these two guys wore their ball caps in, and they're sitting like this in the auditorium, and we had an ex-Vietnam vet who's sitting on the other side, and he looks over there, and the man, that ticks him off. So Pastor is up there, making some announcements. This guy gets up, walks right over to those guys and goes, take your hats off. And so the youth sponsors are now trying to come and get, as they're taking him out to the back, pastor finally says, do we have a problem? I'm like, dude, we had it, man. And we still probably have it. So they took him outside, and I see one of the ushers. At that time, I was sitting above a platform. One of the ushers came out, pointed at me, go. So I go running out the back, and sure enough, big fight. These guys took on the ushers, and we had and so the big Vietnam vet. I mean, 4 ushers are holding him back from getting to these kids. I mean, he's a big guy, and these kids are just pummeling our ushers, that are trying to protect him at this point. Police are called. I get them again. I go, come on, guys, let me take you back to. I said, we're gonna go get some lunch together, and tried to deal, but.
Moral of the story is don't confront the bus kids in the middle of the church service.
Or it should have been our youth staff dealing with them before it started. Like, hey guys, you're going to probably need to take your hats off when we come in. I mean, they would have probably responded, but they did not respond to the Army, Vietnam vet at all.
Ideas from you, Chuck, about like how to avoid what Pastor Ken just talked about. No, but also specifically maybe even some students that are outsiders because of they're odd.
I don't have as many of the project kids. I have the introverted. I have the socially awkward. I've never had a youth group where I had less than 3 autistic kids. And some of them are just like, they're clueless. And the other teenagers don't know how to interact with them. Yeah. And so, we already talked about this quite a bit. I think the best ministry for teenagers is teenagers. But in a situation like that, one of our autistic kids, she's so sweet. She fell in love with every guy in the youth group. And she would, they were always like 3 years older than her. And they would, So I remember this one guy, he's like the sweetest guy in our youth group. His name's Caleb. And she would come over and sit next to him. And he would let her sit next to her. And she's just in love. And she's just, she's doing all the facial expressions. And he's just like, completely expressionless. And I went up to him. I said, Caleb, you don't have to let her sit next to you. And it's okay for you to tell her that you don't like her, And he's like, I would never do that. I don't want to hurt her feelings. And I thought, man, that's so sweet. And that I think that meant a lot to me, that our teenagers saw through the, this is a challenged teenager. So I'm going to show them love by being supportive and not being mean or unkind. But in those types of situations, I think a lot of times what you were saying is a sponsor kind of has to jump in and help out. So one of the things that we talk about in our sponsor meetings, which that might be another discussion, I talk about don't let any of the teenagers get left out. And so the priority is, hey, if you see a teenager being left out, find a teenager that can connect them. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. So if it's not going to work that way, then I want a sponsor to go sit next to that teenager, engage them and talk to them and love on them. And at some point, that's not going to be enough. That teenager wants to feel connected to the teens, not just your sponsors. But I want them to feel connected at least with a sponsor at the beginning. So there's always this, there's always a connection through the sponsors, right? To me, that's the answer to how do you connect those kids. There should always be a connection through the sponsors. Your sponsors should love every kid, even if they're socially awkward. And they should be the ones that are most willing to bridge that gap and help that kid that's socially awkward. But eventually, they have to get connected to other teenagers as well.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And one thing, and I think teens today are more sensitive to autistic kids.
Yeah.
I think you see that in teenagers, even some of the hard teenagers, and you don't want anything to happen, especially when you're having visitors come in. Like on a Sunday morning, my rule was, hey, let's don't move chairs around, okay? Sponsors help me out. Don't move chairs around. And I kid you not, we had a visitor, a young lady come in. She's sitting in a row by herself, and some of the girls came and moved the chairs to eventually that's the only chair in the row. They moved them all. So here she is, and I just went back and I said, hey, listen, come on up here. I want you to sit with somebody I know. And I said, I apologize to you. I said, I feel bad that happened. We don't want that to happen. And I said, I think these girls will see that really hurts you, and I apologize about that.
Okay, you just sparked one more thought. This year, our junior high boys were like really bully heavy. You know, I don't know if you've ever had bullying in your youth group, but that's heartbreaking as a youth pastor. You're like, what? In our youth group? And our junior high boys were being very aggressively inappropriate in their teasing and picking on other people. And I'm trying to decide how I want to address it. You know, I've pulled some of them aside and, you know, done all those things that we normally do. And so I'm really like, I really need to talk about this to the whole youth group. And so then Monday afternoon, I'm preparing my message for Wednesday night. We're preaching through the book of 1 John. And the passage that we're getting ready to preach through on Wednesday night is, how can you say you love God if you don't love your brother? So here's my plug for expositional preaching. The Holy Spirit can work through the Word of God to reach people on the topics that are a challenge in your youth group. It was almost surreal how timely this message was, and to be able to insert things like, how on earth can you call yourself a Christian if you're making fun of other teenagers, if you're bullying them, if you are being derogative towards people in a racial manner? Like, how on earth can you call yourself a Christian? That's the language that John is using. I mean, I'm kind of reflecting on preaching this. And then the response. I mean, we had an altar full of junior high boys that have never gone to the altar before. So preaching expositionally, it's not the only solution. Individual conversations are absolutely necessary, but man, sometimes that's the methodology that God uses to bring people to repentance.
One final question on reference to unifying your youth group and that growth is when a senior graduates and they stay in the church, and keeping them connected and engaged for the benefit of the youth group. Have you had experience with that? There was a question asked about that, because sometimes they just fall away, and that can be damaging to the youth group if they see a teen that's not serving and not living for the Lord.
You guys probably have a college ministry, right?
I think, you know, one of the two things that I thought about was...
You think that Campus Church might have a college ministry. He just now got it.
Well, we actually have a... One of the things I would recommend is, you know, having a young adults program. And I think the challenge that often comes with that is you do young adults and then it becomes like all the single people that are 50 and they're super awkward, and it kind of destroys the young adults aspect. So protecting that, as in, you know, saying this program is going to meet once a month for Bible study and fellowship, and it's for people that are 18 to 25. Like, giving yourself parameters helps a lot with that. But having some kind of program is important, but I don't think that's the ultimate answer. I think the best answer is approach them and connect them to a place of service. People who are serving in your church are committed to your church. So if you've been doing that in youth group, you've been teaching teenagers to serve all the way through your youth group, when they graduate, you know, connect them. Hey, man, you've been in our youth group for the last 5 years, and I know that you're going to be staying here in town. You're going to Pensacola State. And so, I want to encourage you. We've got a spot open on our usher crew on Sunday mornings, and I really think that you could help us fill that. You're young. You're athletic. You can walk down that aisle real good. So, I'm being a little silly, a little facetious with that, but find a way to connect them into your church ministry. You know, hey, you're really good with kids. I think you should start helping out in junior church. Put them in a place of service. And a personal invitation with this generation is absolutely necessary. When you make announcements on Sunday morning, people are like, okay, cool, you know. Like, recruiting volunteers is one of the hardest things we do. We announce and announce and announce and announce and announce, and nobody ever volunteers. But if you go personally up to them and say, hey, man, I think you'd be a great fit for, it's really hard for them to deny that. And now they're committed. And it can be something as easy as the parking lot. You know, like, we need we don't have this at our church, but we need a guy that would take on the parking lot, because people are backing into each other and there's kids running around. We need to improve safety in the parking lot. Would you be willing to take up our parking lot ministry? And then this guy's like, you would let me run a department of the church? And now they're vested. They're invested. So
you made a nice transition into like the teen workers and who you use and what you do for training, and do you have criteria for them, and how do you go about making sure you're unified in philosophy and direction and focus, and you're not contradicting each other. So talk about the training and what to look for youth workers.
Well, I think, first of all, in 2025, you absolutely need to do a background check on every volunteer that works with a minor. If your church is not doing that, it's pretty simple. It's usually like $8 to $15, depending on what company you use. But you should be running a background check on every person. You say, well, I know this person. I've known this person my whole life. It's a safety protocol you need to have in place to protect you and your ministry. You probably have an insurance company at your church. You should be contacting that insurance company and saying, hey, what kind of things do I need to do for our volunteers to protect them? We did that. They came up with a list of things that we should do. So I do a questionnaire for every potential volunteer. And it's like questions, basic questions like, what's your name, address, are you married, do you have kids? And then it's questions that I am going to benefit from, like, why do you want to serve in youth ministry? Have you served in youth ministry in the past? What are some of the things that you are skilled in, like music or athletics, or what are some of the things that interest you? What are some of your hobbies? And then after they fill that questionnaire out and I run a background check, then I go and meet with them and I just talk through like, hey, who are you? I want to know who this person is. I get to know them a little bit. And then I usually plug them into a role that is not a full-time youth staff role. So like, hey, would you mind coming and serving the meal at our next activity? I need somebody to help out in the kitchen. Because I want to know these people are servants first and then teen workers second. Does that make sense? I can train people how to connect with teenagers. I can't train people to serve. So what I don't want people that are going to sit in the back and tell teenagers what to do. I don't want sponsors who just sit and talk to each other the whole time. I want caring adults who will invest in the next generation. So that goes from, this is the transition, so to speak, from, all right, I'm trying to recruit people, to now I have a person that I think is servant-minded. They're going to invest in, okay, now I want to train them on that. So I'm going to spend 3 hours on a Saturday morning. I'm going to provide food, because people don't come unless you provide them food. So I'm going to provide food, kind of like this. They're going to be eating, and I'm going to spend 3 hours training, as if I was training counselors for camp. Honestly, it's a lot like that. So I'm going to go through, this is how, these are all of our protocols. This is our handbook. This is everything that you need to know. And these are all the things that I expect of you. Okay, but here's why I expect those things. Here's my goals. Here's my vision. Here's where I want our youth group to go. And that happens because you do this and this and this and this. And I'm trying to duplicate myself in my volunteers so that we have a unified front of investing in teenagers, so that teenagers will fall in love with Jesus Christ and desire to serve Him first and foremost. Wow, that was a lot.
No, that's good. That's good. Any comments from you, Ken, on that? Training workers or...
No, I think Pastor Chuck hit on it.
So move to another area. A lot of times people think that youth directors have to be these massive activity providers. The balance of activities versus obviously preaching and biblical teaching in your youth group night. Somebody asked this: how do you balance a strong emphasis on scriptural teaching with fun activities in your youth group? Should Wednesday night be 40 minutes of activity and 15 minutes of preaching, or the exact opposite? Talk about the balance of this and what your philosophy is and how that dictates what you do.
You want to think on it?
Yeah, well, I think it needs to probably be somewhat balanced. It can't be one or the other dominant. And then, a lot of youth groups will have small groups, that they'll use on Wednesday nights, especially that are, you got to consider that time too. I'm sure that's what you guys do. I know we used to do that. Youth groups can kind of go like this, right? So you can't panic when it's kind of like this. Right now, we're working on a young youth group now, and they are pumped and excited to get in the youth group. And so, so now we're
ebb and flow.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just how it is. And really, I mean, for President Trump to say, hey, I want to start paying women $5,000 to have babies, it shows that there's a decline with young people. I mean, you see it even in the public schools. I went to a public school basketball game, and a guy is coaching there, and I said, that's all the girls you have? He goes, from ninth grade to seniors, we only have 15 in the program. I go, you got to be kidding me. I mean, it's a massive school, probably in the day, probably had 2,000 students. They might be doing well if they have 700 right now. And so these youth groups, you might start seeing it more like this. And, when you get the young kids in, that there's an excitement there and you build on that with them.
I think it's going to come down to your philosophy. You need to shore up what is my philosophy, and then you need to run that through your pastor. So, pastor, what is our philosophy? So I have a strong connection in our program where we start with a 15-minute something fun, but not so fun that teenagers have to attire themselves different from what we are asking of them. So, for example, we ask our girls to wear skirts on Wednesday nights. Well, I'm not gonna play kickball or dodgeball because girls shouldn't be running around in skirts playing those games. So I'm not gonna do that, right? So we do, and then I do a variety of fun things. We even do skits sometimes instead of games. Right? I think fun is an important connection for teenagers, but your main service probably doesn't have fun in it, right? So I want them when they leave youth group to not go, well, I'm gonna stop going to church because there's no fun at church anymore.
Right.
So I want my Wednesday night service to have a youth. I say it this way: I want it to have a youth group flavor, but really it should just be like the rest of our church. So I make activities awesome. I do activities on the weekends, and then our midweek service, because this is our philosophy. Our midweek service is a little bit more of that. We want you to come here because you're growing, and if teenagers are growing spiritually, they're going to want to be there. So we serve our small group time at the end. We put it at the very end. And we do 15 minutes of small group where the primary goal of small groups is for teenagers to talk to teenagers about what they learned in the message. So what are some of the points of application that stuck out to you that you're going to implement into your life tomorrow? What is the problem with the American church? We are hearers of the word, but not doers. What is the problem with youth groups? They're the same thing. Everybody comes and listens, but nobody changes anything in their life. Okay, well then help teenagers change things in life. So we insert every week. I have a guy that does it now. I used to do it myself. But I have a theology professor that is in our youth group, and he's way smarter than I'll ever be. So I said, hey, why don't you write the questions each week? So I'm preaching, and he pulls the points of application for my message and writes application questions for small groups and then sends it in the group chat. And every small group leader pulls it up. And those questions are things like, when I preached on love your brother, if you don't love your brother, you can't call yourself a Christian. So his point of application was, who is somebody that's really hard for you to love? Well, now, at first it's awkward, right? The first couple small groups were really awkward. But now we're at a point in our youth group where they're more comfortable and they'll talk about it. And they'll say, well, so-and-so at school he's unkind and it's really hard for me to, okay, well now a sponsor can insert some thoughts and some comments. Our sponsors are not re-preaching the message. They're emphasizing application and trying to create discussion. So for me, Wednesday night is spiritual growth. That is the whole point of Wednesday night. So I'm going to preach for 20 to 30 minutes. And if you're going to do that with teenagers, then you got to be dynamic. I love what you said about that earlier. Be dynamic. Be exciting. Be excited about God's word. And then, we're gonna sing songs like we do in the main service. We're not doing our own version of music at youth group. It's very similar to what the rest of the church would do. And we do insert some fun.
Consistency of philosophy is crucial, of course, through the whole of the ministry, and preaching is paramount. Amen. Preaching has got to be paramount. The activities are the connector to the life principles of Scripture, so they can see that being a Christian, you can still have fun, do crazy, zany things. Just think camp. That's what, if I can tell you that, like from the standpoint of, obviously the activities aren't the main thing. They're important, but they're not the main thing. The main thing is that they would walk with God, live for God, and so the instruction that you're giving them from the Word of God is the main thing. If you're spending all your week planning the activity and only 30 minutes throwing together a Bible lesson, that's not the way it should happen. Which is,
that was one thing. I know you're going to say something too, but preach the Word. Don't just give these little shallow devotionals. Teenagers need the meat. They need the meat. So preach the Word.
Yeah, our philosophy at our church is the Word is the most important. So whatever activity we have, whether it's just like this, somebody's going to give a short challenge or something, the Word is going to be the emphasis. Philosophy-wise, we're a little different. The girls are going to be in pants. We want them to be in modest shorts. When summer hits, that's more of an issue we have to deal with. But then on Wednesday night, we have a big activity. And it could be 9 square, it could be 4 square volleyball, it could be pickleball. We set up pickleball. The one thing that they loved was we had a kind of a rubber softball. And, and even the kids that aren't really good, I mean, I would pitch so they could try to at least hit it. But we had one kid put it over the church, and I mean, it's just a little rubber ball, plastic bat. The whole place went crazy. I mean, it got stuck on the roof, so we had to get a ladder, and all the kids, and they're pumped. They're going, like that's the green monster out there, and he put it on top. So, and so I liked what you said about some skits. I wish I had more time. In fact, some guys are really using media to do some fun things, even before you actually do the preaching. So there's all kind of different things that you can do. Yeah.
And we could speak to that. I want to stay on the topic of preaching because the resources for them or just challenging them. There's questions about give us some ideas of what you do for your Bible teaching, some resources that are out there that have been helpful for you. Kind of what kind of plan do you take in your discipleship of the teens, both in the preaching and individual work?
Well, one thing that I did coming back into working with teens is, I traveled for Northland, and, when you walk into a Christian school, and if you're going to connect with them, it can be hard preaching, but they're not usually, I don't know, it might be different where you are, but I developed a series of visual aid type messages. Like let's say I want to focus on Psalm 34, give the background of what David was going through there. And even when he was going through this horrible time, he's faking like he's a madman with the Philistines, so they won't kill him. He says in that passage, "O taste and see the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusteth in him." And, and I said, he's talking about, oh, taste and see. I mean, he's talking about some spiritual taste buds. I mean, we got physical taste buds, don't we? And I started doing this contest as I traveled. I want to have a contest here between guys and girls here on who's sensitive with their taste buds, So, and, I usually pick a couple. I try to, inadvertently act like I don't know who's who. And sure enough, I pick a couple that are dating, and the place goes crazy, and so, all right, you need to get someone, and this is so funny. I said, you choose a young lady you accept, that you trust. She's going to come up, blindfold you, and then there's no funny business here. She's going to, when I say go, she's going to open the candy bar, put it up your mouth. You taste it, and give us the name of the candy bar. Right, guys, same thing. And I don't know what it is, but I'll say, guys, here's the blindfold your buddy. And they blindfold them like this. So the mouth is totally covered up. I said, that's one reason guys have not really been winning this activity very often. I mean, it's called attention to detail, guys. And so we do that. Then I have 4 liquids, and I really go off of this. One, I said, you know what? I've been working with teens my whole life. Nothing's going to hurt you here. In fact, some might even be good for you. But I have 3 drinks that, and then I say, if you want to, and they're only so, the cup's so big. I said, if you want to drink the whole thing, I'll give you $5. Well, then, some of the drinks, I wouldn't, I'm not going to drink all of it. I'll take it. I said, you have to take a sip, and don't, we'll tell you what it is at the end. But I want you to pick out the best. Well, I have grape juice there. Usually that is. But I've had teenagers that come up there that really, I can tell they have attitudes. And they go with this 3rd drink, and everybody thinks it's iced tea, right? And I go, hey, you know what? And I've told them, okay, here's what this was. Hey, what did you think that 3rd drink was? And they go, it was just like terrible iced tea. I go, oh, no, it wasn't iced tea. I said, this youth guy wants you to really know I care about you. I said, that was diluted prune juice. All right? And but this one girl goes, and that's still the best. And I went off in my message on it. I said, you know what? What's so interesting is teenagers, look at it and go, I do a look test. Which would you think would be the best? Now let's go through, do a smell test. What smells the best? Okay, well, they can't really know what it is unless they taste it, right? And I said, here's a problem. A lot of you teens aren't really going after the best. You actually are so stubborn, you're gonna take stuff that is really bad in your life, and you're gonna just start pumping it in. And you know what? As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And so we really focus on, and then I use that illustration. I mean, I can have. It's
a connector to use some lessons like that are tangible. What do they call object lessons? Yep. That connect the dots and help them.
It's fun.
Keeps them engaged and involved, and that's a really good idea. And there's so much you can do there, Chuck.
Well, I think we talked about it a little bit earlier, but preaching expositionally. If you are unfamiliar with preaching. Preaching That Pleases God by Tom Farrell is a phenomenal book. I think you probably have it in your bookstore. If you're unfamiliar with homiletics, that'd be a good place to start. I think that your main weekly meeting is where you preach the word, and then maybe Sunday school or whatever your secondary meeting is. That's where I would do curriculum, and there's lots of curriculum out there. I know Striving Together has some good curriculum. I know that Positive Action has some good curriculum.
You're not a second-class teacher if you use curriculum. Curriculum can be your best friend and make it your own, but the curriculum's there for you. And so don't feel like if I get a curriculum and teach through a curriculum that I'm just not a good preacher. No, I mean, that using a curriculum will keep you structured, and they've thought through it. There's some really great stuff out there that you can use.
I would just encourage you that if you're going to use curriculum, be careful not to just read the content, right?
Yes.
So teenagers need to know that you are engaging them.
We hope that you enjoyed today's episode of Friday Focus, presented by the Walk Talks podcast. Make your plans to join us next week for another set of podcast episodes that will encourage you in your walk with the Lord Jesus Christ.